All right guys, welcome to part 2 of tuning the 2017 Chevy Silverado. Now again, this truck has a 5.3 liter with a 6L80E transmission. It has been upgraded with a BTR Stage 2 L83 truck camshaft. So yesterday's video, we went over how to make the thing idle and just kind of the basics of tuning a torque model, what adjustments need to be made to the VVE table, pretty much just what needs to be done to make the truck idle and be able to drive around. So today we're gonna dive into what needs to be adjusted for the fuel lobe, what needs to be adjusted for the variable cam timing, and what needs to be adjusted to actually make the truck drive nice on the street. I figured a lot of you guys don't really have access to a dyno. Some of you do, some of you don't. Because of that, I figured we'll make the majority of the adjustments today while driving on the street. Now, obviously on wide open throttle, I need to go on the dyno for that kind of purpose. You guys, you can use your racetrack or wherever else you need to make the adjustments, because whether you have a dyno or not, the adjustments are gonna be the same. So let's go ahead on and dive into the tuning process and we'll get started. All right, so we've got our tune file pulled back up. The next thing we need to do is we need to adjust for our fuel lobe. So this application has a 14% fuel lobe. If you look on your cam card, or you can also see it on BTR's website, you'll know your fuel lobe size. Now, what we need to do is we need to tell the ECM that the fuel lobe has been changed. The reason being is because now our high pressure fuel pump is gonna move more volume. So we need to let the truck know, hey, this fuel pump is moving more volume. We need to understand what to do with it. Super simple adjustment. All you gotta do is go up to fuel system, you're going to go over to general, and you're going to notice your pump type, and your pump type on this truck is going to be a leading edge. The majority of the GM vehicles is going to be leading edge. So you come over here to fuel pump, and then you go down to leading edge angle, and the only adjustment we need to make to this table is we need to open up our axis, which again, if you guys ever see the axes that are underlined like this, that means you can alter the values in there. So we're going to open up our axis, and since we've got a 14% fuel lobe, we're just going to increase this by 14%. So multiply times 1.14. And that's it. That's the only adjustment we need to make for the fuel lobe. So the next thing we need to adjust is the variable cam timing tables. So we're gonna go to engine, airflow, variable camshaft. And now this camshaft comes with a 4-degree limiter. Now, if it was a stage 1, really this truck could probably get away with it as well, but I personally like the stage 1s with no limiter. And that way you can retard the camshaft real heavily at light throttle. So I know a lot of you guys will pull up your tables, like your VVT tables, and you'll see this area right here and you think, oh, they did that for emissions. Well, they did it for a number of reasons, but emissions is one, but fuel economy is another big reason. So when you heavily retard the camshaft like this, you reduce pumping loss in the engine, and the engine actually becomes more efficient going down the interstate. So if you alter this table right here and you get rid of that real heavy camshaft retard on your vehicle, it will become more responsive, but you also usually lose in a truck like this, you're going to lose 1 to 1.5 miles per gallon just from touching that. In this application, we're just going to tune the camshaft according to what James Short said to do at BTR. Just know that if you've got a smaller camshaft, you can play around with retarding it really heavily in these areas. You'll be surprised at the kind of fuel mileage increase that you'll get. We're going to go ahead on and make this adjustment. So if you notice on this cam card, it stops at 7,000 RPM and it starts at 4,600. So if you look up here on your axis doesn't match. Well, you can make it match if you want to. So if we want to come up here, we can just follow what the cam card says. So 7,000 at the top, 6,800. Okay, so they're just going down by 200s. So I'll go and make that adjustment. All right, so now that the axis has been set up, all we've got to do is we can just go on and just zero this table out if we want. We'll just zero it. All right, so now that we have a zeroed out table, we know at 5,200, it wants 1 degree retard. 5,400, it wants 2 degrees. And 5,600, it wants 2.5. Now you'll notice that there's no decimal point here. If you want to add a decimal point, you just come up here to increase decimal. And now that we've got a decimal point there. So 5,600, it wants 2.5, 3, 3.5, and then 4 from 6,200 up. Now, if you lost your cam card, there is a PDF download on BTR's website. You just search whatever camshaft you have and they'll have the download for this cam card. So now that we've got that done, and I don't know if I said, but where I started out at was desired angle. These right here are based off of barometric pressure. So where I live, we're going to be in the high area, but you can go in and make adjustments to all of them. And we're only working on intake camshaft. Exhaust camshaft, obviously we don't have because we've only got one camshaft. So if you look, these tables aren't even populated from GM. So you don't have to worry about this side at all. So all you got to do is go over to medium and we're going to paste it in, low. And again, when you click click up at the top, it highlights all, Control-C for copy on the high table, and then Control-V to paste it in. So you can use this as well. You can hit copy and then paste it there as well. We're gonna go under Watt Desired Angle, and we're gonna paste that in, and that's it. We don't have to touch anything else. That's got everything under control. Now, if you plan on revving the truck out higher than normal, BTR Stage Truck Cam does not necessarily want anything above, like it'll make power to 7,000, but in a truck application, we don't need to use that. Just note that at the bottom down here, under enable conditions, you'll see where there's a low RPM enable, low RPM disable, but there's a high as well. So if you go to high RPM enable, you'll see this is set to 6,800, which our rev limiter is set below that. But if your rev limiter is higher than that, make sure you increase this table, because if you don't, that little bit of intake cam retard that you have is going to go away. It's going to go to 0 once you go above this threshold. Just keep that in mind. So that was set to 68 on the truck, and then 7,000 right here. So you'll want to increase that. So say you want to go up to 7,500, then just increase those tables accordingly. So now that we've got that done, we're going to go ahead on and load this in, and I'm going to drive the truck. So right now we're still on stock transmission tune. I have made some torque model adjustments. I have brought in a VVE table that I like. I've done a couple things in the background. If you need to understand how to do that, reference yesterday's video or a lot of the other Gen 5 videos that I have. We talk about VVE tuning, we talk about torque model tuning. I haven't adjusted the trans, so we're going to not write the TCM, and we're going to load this into the ECM, and we're going to go for a drive. All right, so I've got the truck outside. First thing you want to do before you actually go driving on the street, since we're going to be doing some transmission tuning, we want to reset the adaptives on it, and we want to make sure that our long-term fuel trims are reset. So right now I'm going to scroll down to long-term fuel trims, and they should be off because I went ahead and disabled them. If you know how to disable them, I've talked about that in other videos as well, so you can reference back the other Gen 5 videos. If you need to clear them, all you got to do is, while connected to the truck, you come up here to Vehicle Controls and Special Options, and you'll go down to Engine, Fuel, and then Long-Term Fuel Trim Reset. You can click that, and it'll wipe those out. Now, if the truck is running, it may not clear right away. You may have to push it a couple times, or if you want, you can just key on the vehicle, connect to the truck with it not running, and it'll clear out that way. So the next thing we want to do is, like I said, we want to reset our adaptives. Now, this is going to be critical on any 6L80, 6L90, 8L90. If you get one that has really poor shifting habits, if it has clunky shifts, things like that, transmission's it's still in good shape. All you got to do is reset the adaptives and go from there. These transmissions will learn, basically what they're doing is you have a table, I shouldn't just say a table, it's got an entire shift time schedule that basically tells the TCM, okay, this is how long we want it to take for each shift. It will learn bad habits from different fluid temperatures, different clutch pack heights, you know, if your clutches are worn, fluid's worn, if the transmission temp's been overheated a couple times, it will learn bad habits. This truck's got 116,000 miles on it, so when we want to start off with transmission tuning, we want to start with no adaptives at all in the trans. So to do that, you go to transmission, automatic, and then you're only going to click these top 3 buttons. We're not worried about the trans fast learn. We're not worried about the trans clean procedure. These are used in more of a shop environment. The trans fast learn, what that is basically get your transmission temp. I believe you go up to like 153 degrees on transmission temp or so. You push down the parking brake, and then you follow, like you actually log the channel for trans fast learn. And if you guys want a video on that, I can show y'all doing that. In the trucks, it doesn't work as good. It works good in like the G8s and 5th-gen Camaros and things like that. But basically, you just follow directions. It'll tell you to put it in drive. And the engine and trans go through a procedure to where the TCM starts to learn the oncoming and offgoing preset pressures. It'll actually apply gears, and it figures out exactly how much it takes to apply that gear. And it'll actually back off pressure to determine the least amount of pressure it takes to hold that gear. And it just automatically learns that way. I don't recommend that on the trucks. Again, the trucks, a lot of the times they'll fail. A lot of the times they are hard to get the transmission even up to temperature, especially if you've done the updated thermostat in the side of the trans. So I just don't recommend that. The best thing to do is you click the top 3 buttons, and again, only the top 3 buttons. Now, if you'll notice, there's no pop-up, there's no nothing like that. Just know that when you click it, if it's connected to the scanner, the adaptive's been reset. So now when you go to drive it, it may shift kind of funny at first. You may have some weird flares. You may have some missed shifts, things like that. Usually within the first 2 or 3 miles, everything will be corrected. Sometimes it takes longer. If you've got a really worn out transmission, like I think yesterday or day before, I was also tuning on an 8L90 truck, and that truck, the transmission was not in good shape. So I cleared the adaptives, and I had to drive it like 20 miles before it got to the point where it wasn't flaring each shift. Traditionally, in a 6L80 truck, we can tune oncoming and offgoing preset pressures to help offset that. In the 8L90 trucks, we can't. So we can adjust shift times, we can adjust shift pressures, but oncoming and offgoing is not accessible on 8L90. I'm not sure if they even use that logic. I would assume that they do. Don't quote me on that. Now that the transmission has been reset, truck's warming up right now. You'll see we're still a little low on ignition timing. Again, it's not a huge deal. Right now the truck's actually idling really smooth, and we've got good manifold vacuum. So honestly, if it stays like this, I may increase the idle timing just a little bit, but man, I mean, the way the truck feels right now actually feels really good. One thing I will want to address is I do need to bring down the rail pressure some. And when you bring down the rail pressure, what it's going to do is it's going to increase your injector pulse width at idle. And by doing that, we should be able to smooth out the engine a little bit more. I'm not sure why, but on these like 2017, 2018 trucks, GM has this really funky section of super high rail pressure. They may have a reason for, or I shouldn't say they may. I know they have a reason for that, but the earlier trucks didn't have that. It doesn't make sense to me, so I'll go ahead on and I'll put them back to like a 2015 style table, and the trucks are happy. Anyways, let's go ahead on and drive this thing and collect some data. You'll notice that we're just working with short-term fuel trims. And the reason why I do this is especially with aftermarket exhaust, aftermarket camshafts, long-term fuel trims can learn bad habits. But I've never seen any negative side effects from having long-term fuel trims disabled. The positives of it are when customers have headers like this, when they eventually burn a plug wire, the long-term fuel trims don't learn that misfire. Once the customer fixes the misfire, I'm not getting phone calls on, hey, my truck's running funny now that I fixed the misfire, and it's because of the imbalance of fuel trims. It also won't carry fuel trims through wide open throttle. I like these trucks to be as consistent as possible. So as we're driving right now, I'm noticing a little bit of flares, but it's not bad. So it honestly feels like this transmission's in pretty good shape. Again, you'll know when they're in bad shape. When you reset the adaptives and they'll almost feel like they put you in neutral for a couple seconds before it shifts, that's usually a sign of it's a worn trans. Fuel trims are still looking good. VE airflow is matching pretty well. Now again, I did pull in a VVE table that I use as a base. Now keep in mind, when I'm doing remote tuning, I don't just slam a VVE table in there and just call it good. Every time the customer drives it, I'll make a MAF and VVE change, especially when they have a ton of data. So the good thing about doing street tuning like this is you can collect a ton of data. On the dyno, I just don't have the fans to actually keep up with the amount of temperature that this truck's gonna create if I'm just running steady state on the dyno like that. So usually what I'll do is my normal tuning process would be, if I'm not on camera, is the truck would go into open loop, I would dial in the MAF curve loaded on the dyno, I would sweep through the VVE table, make sure everything's good, go through wide open throttle, and then I'd get out on the street and I'd use the short-term fuel trims just to finish dialing in everything. When you're tuning your own vehicle, you want to take as much data as possible. If you're driving to work and you've got a 20, 30, 45 minute drive to work or longer, data log it all. The more average data you can get on fuel trims and VVE and everything else, the better off it's gonna be. So right now we're pulling up a little bit of a grade. I don't know what fuel this truck is on, but you'll see that the knock sensors are going off a little bit. Right now I'm not concerned with it. I'm just going to continue to drive the truck. So this truck will adapt. You've got your knock learn factor where it constantly goes between the high octane and low octane ignition timing tables. So this truck will actually learn that knock on whatever fuel we're on, and it will actually turn itself down to the low octane table. So I'm not super worried about that. But otherwise, I'm just going to drive this truck for the next couple minutes and collect as much data as I can. Now, as I'm driving, if I want more VVE data, all I got to do is I can pull this truck down into manual mode, and you'll see where RPMs increase, and now we're filling up that section of the VVE table. You can downshift, upshift, whatever you need to do. The more you work on the light throttle stuff, the better off it's going to be for low speed transmission shifting. I know a lot of you guys will run into excessive torque management and excessive shift times. The more low speed stuff, the more accurate that VVE table is, the better off everything is, including your transmission. That's why I'm going to always push for VVE tuning the correct way and trying to get it as dialed as humanly possible. So like right now we're doing, well, I guess we're doing like 67, but if the truck will let me downshift, I'll go and downshift it again. You know, we're still just collecting data. And you'll see in those areas that my VE airflow table is a little bit farther off in this high vacuum area on this specific truck. But that little bit of a drive, the 1-2 shift feels good, 2-3 is still flaring. So I have a feeling that I'm gonna need to make at least an oncoming preset pressure change to the 2-3. But I also have not touched shift times, I haven't touched torque management, I haven't touched anything on this truck. So as of right now, we're 13 minutes into this drive and I'm almost back to the shop. So I'm going to continue to collect this data and then we'll make some adjustments from there. All right, so we're back at the shop now, and we're gonna go ahead on and look at the data. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up short-term field trims versus MAF. Now, if you need to know how to do this table, all you gotta do is right click, graphs layout. You come up here to add graph. You can add table. You can click parameter, and you can type in STFT. This top is a search bar. You just click short-term field trim. Where it's not bank 1 or bank 2, you just do it as a generic. You would change unit to percent, decimals to however many you want. So we'll say, we'll just do 1 decimal. Column axis, parameter is gonna be mass airflow sensor frequency. Right here, mass airflow sensor frequency. It's gonna pop up, would I like to use a generic? Sure, yes, sounds good. And then you're gonna go over here to your table, find our MAF calibration, go to airflow versus frequency. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna right click, column axis, we're gonna copy the labels. And then all I gotta do is come in here and paste it. So that has our short-term field trim versus MAF table. So now all I've got to do is we pull that up and it'll be populated. If you want to change to where, like I like to do it where it's like if it's lean, so let's go to short-term field trims. We'll say high value of 25, low value of negative 25. And then obviously a high value is going to be lean. So you can make the color red. If you want to make low value, which would be rich, you want to make it green. And that'll change the color. So it'll kind of give you an idea as to how far off you are. Now, the farther off you are, the darker the colors will be, but you'll see that we're pretty close. Now, some of this data is not gonna be correct. You'll notice how it goes from 2.5% to 7%. What you wanna do is you wanna increase your cell counts to where you're getting, basically the cell counts is how many hits it takes to actually fill that data in. So we're gonna go back, short-term field trims, graph layouts, go back down here to short-term field trims, and right now you'll notice that the cell hits required are 0. So that means if it even kind of hits that frequency, whatever's in that data, it's going to populate it. So for driving around, I like to make this 100. So if you notice how when I went to 100, that 7 went away, and that's because we really didn't stay in that spot long enough to actually do something good with it. So that's how far off we are. We're actually pretty freaking close, and honestly, the more I drive it, the better off it'll be. Now again, this truck has a stock airbox on it, so the MAF should be pretty close, especially part throttle. Wide open throttle, you're going to have to add some fuel to it because the engine is obviously moving more air, but for the most part, factory table looks good. Now we're going to go to my Dyno Air versus VVE air table. And again, if you want this style setup, you can go to the website and buy the layout. But this is going to tell me roughly how much I'm off on VVE. So you'll see it looks like I'm a little bit off in like the mid throttle ranges. Nothing terrible though. I mean, 7% is not bad. Up here, got 15%. We're starting to drift off a little bit. So not bad. So I'm going to make these adjustments now. If you want to know how to take these adjustments and put it into your table, the black C7 Corvette video I did a few videos ago shows you the exact process of how I average things and do all that stuff. So I'm going to make an adjustment to VVE. But everything else is honestly looking good. So I'm gonna make these adjustments. We're gonna go back out and drive it. And then what we'll do is while we're out on the street, I'm gonna give you guys an idea of how the transmission feels now that these adjustments are made. And if we have to make some transmission adjustments, we'll go into that. Keep in mind, right now we're driving stock shift points, stock shift time, stock everything. So we'll go through that process as well. So I'm gonna make these adjustments and I'll be back. All right, so I went ahead on and made those VVE adjustments. I also made some torque model adjustments to get the ignition timing up to where I wanted it. Like I said, this truck being a stock converter truck, I wanted it to have low double-digit timing numbers. Now, right now the AC is on. I kick the AC off and the timing you'll see here, AC is off now. All right, I just heard it disengage. You'll notice that we're hovering right there around that 9 to 10 degrees. That should be a happy spot for this truck. So kick the defrost and the heat back on, and let's go ahead on and go for another drive. Now again, you want to make sure all this stuff is dialed in before you start working on your transmission, because your transmission is torque based. And so shift times, line pressure, you name it, everything is based off of airflow model, which is based off of torque model. Everything works together. So when you're working on these, just look at it as you can't just adjust one thing at a time. You've got to kind of make small adjustments to everything all at once. So you'll see right now, of course, I did just flash the truck and just start it back up. So with any of the GM vehicles, I know a lot of you guys ask about the rich after flash. Just give it some time. Like, just let everything settle in. There is an offset versus injector temp table that you can zero it out on Gen 4, and it does seem to help. But every one of these GM vehicles, after you flash it, takes it a minute to actually get settled in and be happy. So 1-2 shift was pretty good. 2-3 shift was so-so. 3.4 definitely had a flare. Now I'm showing a bunch of knock right now, but again, as we drive this truck, everything is going to settle in. So we'll just keep working through it. Now, every time you flash it, it does divert back to, I believe this thing reverts back to the high octane table. I'm 99% sure it reverts back to high octane every time you flash it. And I'm not sure what fuel this truck is even on. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to assume 87 octane. So right now, again, not concerned about the knock. The knock sensors are doing their job. They're completely stock sensitivity. I have not checked the engine mount on this truck yet, so we haven't got to that point yet. When I start it, I do kind of feel that little bit of a shake to where I almost feel like the motor mount could be bad. So as we talked about before in these videos, almost every GM truck has a broken motor mount. I swear I don't know why GM cannot get their motor mount situation straightened up, but pretty much ever since 07, like the 9906 trucks, they still would have motor mount issues, but it wasn't near as bad as 07 and newer. And I was hoping this new body style was going to completely resolve that issue. It hasn't. So especially with set of headers on here, we may actually be seeing some false knock from a weak motor mount. If you notice, I'm doing the exact same type of acceleration and I'm going uphill right now, and the knock sensors aren't going off. So that right there tends to make me believe that we probably have a motor mount issue. So we'll check it when we get back to the shop. But right now, just driving it, letting everything get settled in. As you can see, fuel trims are starting to come back into alignment. The VVE table is starting to come back into alignment. So everything is starting to get happy. Transmission feels okay. Again, I'm on stock shift points. So there's a couple different ways that you can go about adjusting the shift points on these trucks. It really, when it comes down to shift points are more about personal preference. So I've showed you guys in my 6L80 video, I showed you how to use a Blue Cat tool. Blue Cat tool works absolutely fantastic. I mean, that thing, if you use the settings like I used in Blue Cat, if you're more of a, we'll say spirited driver that goes up and down a lot of hills and things like that, using the settings that I showed in that 6L80 video really makes these trucks feel good. But as you start to get into more of the flat areas, some guys don't like how easy it is to downshift. So another thing that you can do to adjust shift points is going to be just base everything off of percentages. So we know that this truck, I think the factory on this truck is like a 5,800 RPM shift. So with this camshaft, we could have it wide open throttle shift at say 62 or 6,300 and the truck be happy. So if you want, you can actually do the math. You can just take, you know, say you want 6,300 RPM shifts. You can go 6,300 divided by 5,800. And of course I'm driving right now, but that's probably like 4 or 5%. And you can literally just go to your upshift and downshift tables, both normal, watt, everything, and multiply it by that percentage. And it will increase every shift and every downshift in that same percentage to where you have more of a factory-like shift point to where they're kind of lazy on downshifts, but again, it's just personal preference. So as I'm driving this truck, I'm going to figure out exactly how I want it to shift. I don't know if I'm going to use the Blue Cat or not. I do think I'm going to lower shift times a little bit. So we'll go through that procedure. We'll probably lower them, I don't know, like we'll probably do a multiplier like 0.75 or 0.8 just to make it shift a little bit faster. But this truck is not a race truck. I don't believe the customer wants to race it. So the goal for me in this truck is going to be to maintain as OE-like drivability as possible while just having it feel better all the way around. So I'm just going to continue to drive and collect data. As you can see, there's some spots in the low RPM, higher load that I'm off. So the goal though is just to collect as much data as humanly possible. Especially, you know, if you drive in the same loop every day, like I said, driving back and forth to work, you're going to experience that stuff to where you can really dial in those tables for your exact application. Now, ideally, the way the manufacturer dials these in, I wish I could dial one in like that. Basically, you know, they're on an engine dyno, temperature's fixed, everything is fixed. They can control the load. They can apply however much load they want at whatever RPM they want. I could technically do a lot of that with the dyno, but it comes down to cooling for the engine, cooling for the trans, cooling for the rear end, cooling for the tires. A lot of guys don't think about the fact that when you're on a dyno for a very long period of time, those tires get hot. So if you watch somebody like Gale Banks or one of the guys that really do heavy engineering in truck applications, you'll see they'll put fans on the tires, they'll have fans underneath the trans pan. Because you got to think a lot of your cooling capacity for the trans comes from the airflow passing the transmission pan itself. So when you're on a dyno, you need some airflow going across that transmission pan. So I wish I could do that. So the goal is just to collect as much data as possible. So this is where the differences start to come in between a dyno tune and a remote tune. So with a dyno tune, you know, a lot of these guys just they'll make sure idle is good. They'll put, well, good-ish. They'll put it on the dyno, they'll dial it in, they'll overtime the engine, they'll lean it out too far, they'll do all this stuff, then they'll send it out the door. This is where remote tuning dominates. If you, the end user, are actually in control of the data logs, the more data you get your tuner, the better off you are. So again, if you take these 45-minute drives and every data log you send your tuner with a 45-minute drive along with some wide open throttle pulls or whatever they're wanting, you would be surprised at just how good you can get that engine dialed. So my personal preference is going to be to, like, if especially a local customer, I like to dial them in as much as I can in person, but ideally I would love for them to have their own HPtuners MPVI3 or similar cable. And I'd love for them to take data logs after the fact, send them to me. I also, as you can tell, I love to educate people and let you guys know how to do it. So the end goal of all of my videos are going to be to hold people accountable. I'm tired of seeing these keyboard warriors on Facebook pages, on YouTube, places like that, where they're trying to sell you on doing tunes, but they put the least amount of effort in as possible. You know, like even my remote tune stuff, there's no time limit. You know, as long as you're not changing parts. You know, I had a customer earlier today email me saying that, hey, you know, he had a crankshaft seal fail on an LT, which, hot tip, the LT crankshaft seals suck. Both front and rear mains, that inverted seal is absolute garbage. The fix, go back to LS3 seals. But anyways, obviously where he's at, super cold outside, shop's backed up on work. He's like, hey, can I get back to you in April? Absolutely. Like, just as long as you're not changing any type of major parts, the time limit doesn't expire. I want everybody's vehicle as dialed in as humanly possible. Cold starts, hot starts, you know, VVE table being dialed, MAF dialed in. So that's just my process. And I don't want to make this sound like it's just a big advertisement for remote tuning. Fortunately, it has worked out that way to where I have got a lot of advertisement from this. But like I said, I want to teach you guys how to do this stuff. So more data you can as possible, always a good thing. There's an entire group of massive birds that they moved. Focus on getting as much data as possible. Even if you got a race car, whether it's on Holley, whether it's stock ECU, whatever, there's no sense in your race car starting like shit. Work on it, take the data. You know, with Holley, I can do a video on this if you want, but you can export your logs on Holley to Tuner Studios and actually like use Megalog Viewer to graph out histograms just like this, and you can take all your closed loop data. You can have a Holley just as dialed as you can on stock ECU and then some. So anyways, I'm going to quit rambling. I'm going to continue to take this data. Right now, you know, 73 mile an hour down the interstate, truck's cruising good, transmission temps are good. So I have 144 degree transmission temp, engine temp's 167. These Gen 5 thermostats are kind of shitty apparently. I had a 15 model Yukon that I bought new, and even earlier models, like lower miles on them, the thermostats just suck. They don't hold temp. So I don't know if it's just they put too much cooling capacity on the radiators or what, but I mean, we're 167 degrees, and I mean, this truck's been driving for a while. You know, I would love for these trucks to keep that temperature up, because I know a lot of you guys like the colder temp. And realistically, for road course applications, for drag racing, things like that, lower temp, sure, it works good. But for everyday usage, getting these engines up to temp reduces emissions, it increases fuel mileage, just everything is happier, especially on a DI vehicle. They like to be warm. The only like DI vehicle that I know of that really likes to be cool is going to be the LT4. And the biggest reason for keeping the cylinder head temp down on the LT4 is to keep the blower temp down. You know, you knock 20 degrees off the cylinder heads off of one of those cars, that pulls that 20 degrees out of the blower, it pulls the 20 degrees off the intercooler. It's that much less heat that you're putting into the system, and intake temps are where it's at. If you want to make big power on LT4, especially on pump gas, intake temps that's the critical thing. If you're wondering why your 6th Gen ZL1 dyno's 50 horsepower less than a lot of the guys, look at your manifold air temp. So, especially on the LT4 stuff, you've got IET1, IET2, IET3. A lot of guys are watching their IET1, which is at the air tube itself at your MAF. That's irrelevant almost. I mean, you want to have that for data. Manifold air temp is what you need to focus on. So if you're doing a pull and you've got 160 degree manifold air temp on pump gas, that thing's going to have to be severely under-timed to be safe. So one thing to keep in mind, air charge temperature, that's exactly where it's at. You always want to do as many upgrades as you can to reduce air charge temp. Almost done with the street portion of this. I'm going to drive this a little bit more, get some more data, but once I finish up this round, I may go one more loop. I don't know if it'll be on camera or not, and then we'll get this thing on the dyno and we'll get this thing dialed in. Now, again, as far as shift points go, when I get back to the shop, I'll show you the percentage process first, since I've already showed you the blue cap process. Again, it's personal preference. So that's one thing, you know, as I'm tuning for customers, I'll have some guys say, hey, this thing downshifts too much. Hey, it doesn't downshift enough. Shifting is personal preference. The cool part about these trucks is you've got tow haul that you can utilize as well. If you want to do percentage-based shifts, you know, on normal map, and then you want to have a little bit more spirited, like Blue Cat with sensitive downshifts on tow haul, you can do it that way. Utilize the factory functions of these vehicles as much as humanly possible. It's really nice having multiple transmission maps. Like, honestly, I wish this body style truck had the mode button to where I could actually, you know, turn the knob and have sport and have all this other stuff, but unfortunately we don't. But anyways, drive back to the shop, or I'm going to drive back to the shop, work on shift points, and we'll keep making these adjustments. All right, so let's go ahead and talk transmission adjustments. So like I said, I want to reduce shift times on this truck just a little bit, nothing crazy. So what you're going to do is you're going to go under trans, shift timing, and we're just going to work on these torque adder tables. Basically all these, let's do a 0.75 multiplier. Now we're not going to adjust anything else. You know, you don't really have to go through on a truck like this, especially stock converter. It's not being raced on a factory tire, it's factory, all that stuff. Just some small changes will make all the difference in the world on how that truck drives. So right now what I'm doing is I'm going through the 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6 on both normal and special. I'm not going to touch the 1, 3. I'm not going to touch any of those other ones. So all we're going to do, this right here is going to reduce the amount of time that the TCM is looking to command for the shift. So when you have those just kind of lazy shifts where there feels like there's a long pause, so just know that that long pause is the truck, whatever the shift time is set to. Now the truck has a big algorithm where it uses transition time, desired output factor, inertia. It uses all these to develop an algorithm to where it's basically trying to set up the best shift for each throttle position. For, like, Ford calls it a change of mind shift. But all we're doing is we're just going to make, this is essentially the table that we're adjusting on right now is essentially the base table. And so when you reduce it, it's basically reducing everything globally. So by reducing it by 25%, we're gonna have a 25% faster shift. Now the process is, the TCM has a shift time that it's looking for. It adjusts oncoming and offgoing preset pressures itself using adaptives to achieve that shift time. Again, with trans wear, you may have to actually adjust the oncoming and offgoing preset pressures. So just a quick rundown of those. If you're, let's say for wide open throttle tuning, if you're wide open throttle tuning and it's going to do the 1-2 shift, and you have a flare before the shift, right? Say 6,000 RPM, you're commanding the shift, all of a sudden it flares up, that needs more oncoming preset pressure. So say it goes through and makes the 1-2 shift and it's fine, but when it's in a second gear, when the RPM comes down and there's a flare right there and then it pulls itself down, that's offgoing preset pressure. So you've got oncoming that's holding one gear, offgoing holding the next, and you're trying to make those two happy to where they don't bind, they don't do anything like that. So that's kind of like the short rundown on oncoming and offgoing preset pressures. Those things to adjust those are going to be under shift pressures and under adaptive, and you'll see oncoming preset pressures here labeled by what gear and by what mode you're in. So when you see special is going to be your tow haul mode in this truck application. So if you want to find out, you can go under shift general and it'll show you the different patterns. And then so if you data log the pattern, so like right now the truck's running, let me go down to shift pattern, and you're going to see trans shift mode is in normal. Let me put the truck in the drive. So we're still in normal, so that means we're on the normal schedule. So we're on the normal upshifts, downshifts. As far as shift timing goes, we're on the normal side for this torque adder right here. So watch what happens when I push toe haul. And now you'll see we're in pattern A. So if we want to make an adjustment for the shift schedule for pattern A, you shift scheduling, you'll see pattern A is right here, but also note that it's going to use the special pressures for shift times. It's going to use it for line pressure, things like that. So that's just the kind of the quick rundown. I talked a little bit more about this in my 6L80 video, but let's just do normal mode right now for shift points to where we're just going to globally increase it. So like I said, the easiest way of doing this is doing it. Okay, so we got 5,600 RPM shift. So let's say we're going to shift this truck. Let's do 6,200 for reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Tools, Calculator. Let me make this a little bit smaller. All right, so 6,200 divided by 5,600 equals. And so that's a 10% difference on shift speed. So all we got to do is we can copy this number, and you can go under Upshift, highlight all, paste in your number up here, multiply. You can do the same for downshifts, and you can do the same thing for each gear. Now, doing it in this manner is going to have the downshifts, upshifts, torque converter, everything like factory, just elevated 10%, obviously. So I'm going to do that to these shifts. I'm not a big fan of this keypad or this touchpad on this laptop. It's a lot bigger and it's a lot more sensitive than the old computer that I was used to. I know, first world problems, right? All right, so under full throttle shift RPM, we can just go under here. We know it was going to be roughly a 600 RPM increase. Let's just do 600 not times. Let's just do a 600 RPM increase across the board. We'll do that for fifth gear as well. Even though the truck would never hit this, or I hope not. I hope y'all aren't pushing these trucks up into fifth gear that high. Not with a stock drive shaft at least. But either way, we'll just make our changes uniform like that. Keeping that number, that saved multiplier. Let's go under torque converter, apply release. Let's move it all up the same way. And it's gonna max out at 318 up here anyways. So that's fine. But if you make these changes in a uniform manner like that, you're gonna maintain that uniform shifting. So like I said, I'll have some customers that don't want it to downshift, especially once you re-gear these trucks. You know, I've got a lot of trucks on like 35s with like a 456 gear with a 6L80 where it's got just a lot of gear ratio, and they don't like to downshift as much. Full throttle, we're gonna do the same thing. And so it kind of works out good, because when you do it in a percentage base like this, obviously with a larger camshaft, it shifts the entire torque curve over. So by the camshaft shifts the torque curve over, you shift the shift schedule over to match it. So if you think about it, it simplifies everything. So that's good right there. Now, while we're on the subject of torque converter, some of you guys like to delay them till third or fourth gear. It's completely fine. Factory knew what they were doing. Now they do ask for a lot of TCC slip. So we can go under here and we can go and zero out the desired slip tables. Now this part right here has kind of been controversial. I've had some guys say that with this converter clutch material that you have to keep some slip in there. I mean, my last Yukon, I think I sold it with like 240,000 miles on it. The TCC slip tables were zeroed out since day one, and it was on the factory trans, factory torque converter, factory everything with no issues. I had it locking up in second gear. I was doing all the same stuff, because obviously locking up in a lower gear does help fuel mileage some. It also just makes the truck feel a little bit better, in my opinion, as far as like light throttle driving goes. But doing it like that handles that part. So I'm gonna go ahead on and input the data that I saw from that last data log. So I'll dial in the MAF again, VVE adjustment again, and then load the ECM tune with this trans tune into the truck, and I'm gonna drive it one more time. All right, tune file has been loaded in. I'm gonna go ahead on and I'm going to reset the adaptives again because I adjusted shift time. And I'm going to try to get an idea of if we need to make an oncoming or offgoing preset pressure change with this. Now hopefully this is the final drive for the truck as far as on camera goes. Usually what I'll do is after the dyno, I'll take them back out, because on the dyno I'm going to be making timing adjustments, I'm going to be making torque model adjustments, I'm going to be working on possibly peak torque. Actually, we'll take that back, this truck shouldn't need any peak torque adjustments. But either way, as it's starting to get final dialed, you just keep testing and just keep testing and just keep going until it drives exactly the way you want it to. This truck is on a completely stock driver demand table. Driver demand in these are pretty good in the 17, 18 models. Now they do need work in the earlier models for sure. So we're seeing that knock again. I still forgot to check the motor mount. Nothing audibly going on, and honestly, whenever it picks up like that, it just feels like the truck just got neutered with power. So I'm pretty sure it's false. But again, I'm doing light throttle driving, not too concerned about it right now. But so far, I mean, the truck seems to be driving good, it idles good. So I'm just gonna keep going. So we're getting on the interstate now. Fuel trims are starting to settle in really nice. As we've talked about in other videos, from the manufacturer, they're usually 5, 6, 7% off, sometimes as much as 10% off on fuel trims. You don't have to sweat the fuel trims. Now, if it's your personal vehicle and you have plenty of time to take data, by all means, get those suckers as dialed as humanly possible. But when it comes down to it, just understand that the manufacturers have fuel trims in there for a reason, and that these trucks, I mean, you're going to use them on different fuels at different temperatures. Things are going to change a little bit. So obviously that's where it comes down to, the more data, the better. But focusing on trying to get the fuel trims all plus or minus 2% within an hour or two, it's just, it's hard to do. It really is. So, but everything's looking good on here. VVE table's looking good. I mean, I'm happy with how this thing's driving. The percentage-based shift points seem to feel pretty good on this truck. So I think I'm going to leave them like this and see what the customer thinks. Again, I don't see any like evidence that he tows a lot or anything like that. So this thing just being a cruiser, these shift points feel really good. So now personally, I like my trucks to downshift fairly aggressively, but I'm also a different breed. But shift times feel good. I don't feel like this truck needs any oncoming or offgoing preset pressure adjustments. Everything is completing the shift. As you can watch the shift right here with torque management, everything is shifting just nice. We're not getting crazy aggressive shifts. It's not neck snapping. You can barely feel the thing shift, but you can just know that it's shifting quickly. So overall, I'm happy with how the transmission feels in this. I may do some other little tweaks, but that'll be on the final drive after the dyno. So basically where I'm at right now is, I think it's dyno time. So I'm gonna drive this thing back to the shop and get it strapped down, and we'll see what kind of power this thing makes. Again, I have no idea what fuel this truck's on. The truck I tuned, the last truck I tuned, it had a 220 camshaft in it, and it was lifted on like 33s or 35s. Stock converter with a 220 cam on 87 octane in a 6.2 truck, and it hated timing. I mean, just hated it. So I think the final pull we were in like the low to mid teens on ignition timing. And that's just, the customer said that he drives it on 87 all the time. He tows, he does things like that. So I wasn't super thrilled with it, but we got the tune dialed in to where the truck's safe. But yeah, so we'll see what kind of fuel this thing's on. This truck having a smaller camshaft and having headers on it, it definitely is, even if the truck's on 87, it's still gonna be pretty happy. So I would expect this truck's probably gonna make stock gearbox, stock catback. I think we can see 340 out of it. I think that'd be a good number. So especially not knowing what fuel it's on. So I mean, I've had these trucks making like the 360, 370 range before when they have a good cold air and they got a good exhaust on there. I've had them make obviously more than that when they're on 93 or even E85. You know, I've crossed 400 horsepower with these L83s before with all the bolt-ons and a good camshaft. So, but I think 340, 350 would be a good number for this truck. So hopefully it at least gets to there. I think we can. The unfortunate thing on the 5.3 is that their catbacks are really small. They have like a 2.5-inch tailpipe on them. So these engines, they really do like to breathe. But anyways, we're almost back to the shop now. So I'll pull this thing in and we'll get it strapped down to the dyno and we'll do some rips. All right, so going under the truck, let's see if we see any leaks or anything. Looks like we may have a little bit of an oil cooler drip right there. Oh, that motor mount looks new actually. Anyways, exhaust clearance looks okay. Oh, it's been hitting the crossmember. I don't know if you can see that or not. Bet that's our false knock right there. You can see all the fresh metal. Anyways, goes 3.5 to 3 to the stock catback. You can just see how small this pipe is. She's not very big. Front U-joint feels okay. Stock muffler still has a little flapper valve in there. I don't know if y'all have seen this, but it's at least free. It's not stuck. Rear U-joint feels pretty good. Obviously I didn't feel any vibrations in the truck, so we should be good. But these have a little resonator and a little rinky-dink tailpipe on there, so that'll be a little bit of a restriction, but let's get it down and get it strapped onto the dyno and make some power. All right, truck's on the dyno. So what we're gonna do is we are in vehicle simulation mode. I'm gonna turn off StabiliTrack. If you didn't know, on the GM stuff, you can turn off StabiliTrack by pushing and holding the button down for 10 seconds. Now this era of truck, once you get to a certain power level, you actually have to disable it in a different manner, which would be Shane Hines, I think, offers a plug and play kit that I think it goes to the front ABS sensor, and when you trip the switch you can actually do, like, you know, rolling burnouts and all the cool stuff, but this truck doesn't make that kind of power. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead on and start collecting some data. Now I did just flash a tune in. I went ahead on and had to raise the threshold to where I can hold the truck locked in a specific RPM and a specific gear. I've showed that in other videos. If you want to look, you'll go to trans and it's commanded gear control limits. I just moved this up to 7,200 mile an hour. And that way I can use the scanner to actually hold the truck in a specific gear. So right now we're in second gear. I'm gonna do the majority of the wide open throttle stuff in second gear just because I don't like to have that super long dyno pull at that rate of speed that many times. So I usually do the wide open throttle fueling in a more loaded version of second gear, and then when we actually do the dyno pulls, I'll go third gear. It's third gear on this truck. It's a 342 gear truck, I'm pretty sure. Let's see, edit, gear and tire wizard. Yeah, 342 gear. So 342 gear in third with the converter locked, it'll probably see 108 mile an hour or so, and that's really the max you want to see on a stock drive shaft. Controls and special functions, locked it in second gear, converter's locked. So let's go ahead on and roll into the throttle and see how far off our MAF curve is. Now I built this MAF curve based off of the data that we pulled from the street. So you'll see, if you're consistent with your street data, you'll see how close we are on the wideband. All right, so looks like we're basically spot on. Let's see, EQ error versus MAF. I mean, we're close. So that shows you, as long as you're uniform in your changes and you're really paying attention to what you're doing and you make sure you collect enough data for short-term fuel trims, if you keep that data uniform, that's how close your MAF curve can actually be. So now if you notice how rich the truck is, this truck is, right now it's on a bone stock timing table. Like all the IAT adders, everything is stock. The power enrichment table is stock. So I'm just dialing it in like that right now. So I'm gonna shut the truck off. Let me reduce the amount of hits we need on the EQ error versus MAF. We'll just take it down to 0, just kind of get an idea where we're at. All right, so looks like we start the pull and we're basically dead on from 7950. Actually, I need to go in and make sure my axis, because this is a later model truck. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the trucks, I think around 16 or 17, they changed the MAF frequency. And I'm sure I have a layout that's set up for the late truck MAF frequency, but we'll just change it. So normally it goes 0 to 15,000 and it goes in like 150 or 150 hertz increments. These are a little bit different. And you can change it. A lot of the trucks, especially the trucks with aftermarket intakes and stuff, I'll go in and just change the axis back to like the older style and dial it in that way. you have all the information in this table to completely convert over that table. Because like right now, if you were to try to input data in and then smooth, it's going to skew your smoothing results because the axis itself isn't smooth. So anyways, I'm going to right click, column axis, copy labels, go over to EQ error versus math. I think the top portion is actually the same, but just to make sure we're doing this right. All right, so let's go back over 7950. It looks like we're about 4% rich up top, so not bad at all. But this truck has everything still turned on. I mean, all the knock enrichment, everything is still turned on. So we'll make this adjustment. And I'm just gonna assume since 9150 was off 4%, that up above it, we need to reduce it by 4%. So we're gonna load this in. Let's get an idea, actually before I load that in, let's get an idea of how far off the VVE table is up top. Should ignore that. Oh, we're pretty close. So now that I reduced the math down, it's gonna make this top part of the table basically dead on from what I can tell. So I'm gonna load this in and then we'll do another hit. All right, so I got that tune file loaded in. Now one thing, this little tip that I wanna show you guys, I've showed you in other videos, but just to make sure, if you notice, I haven't changed the name of this tune file at all. The reason being is because HPtuners automatically, not only do they automatically save your logs, but they automatically save your tune changes. So a lot of guys will make tune changes and they're like, shit, I made a mistake, I need to go back. All you've gotta do is come up here, if I can get it to pull up and see what it actually says. All right, it's not pulling up. Anyways, this little piece of paper with the clock. So this will actually show you your saved history logs. So say I want to make a change. This shows you how many times I've made changes just today on this file. If you want, you can open up this one and you'll see that under engine, I changed stuff that's under fuel and spark. So if you want, you can actually right click it and open as compare file. And now that specific tune is in the compare file. So you can see the differences. We can go to compare, view comparison log, and you'll see that I changed the math calibration in that one. So super simple. Like, it just makes it nice and easy. All your changes are always saved. Notice how this says base? This is the initial where you open the file up. So usually it's your initial read file. So say you make a bunch of changes and you forget to save the stock file. If you click this paper button with the clock, you can go back to your base. It's there, it's saved automatically. HPtuners, they got it dialed when it comes to they save your tunes automatically and they save your logs automatically. Thought that was a cool little tip for you guys. Saw somebody post on the Facebook page yesterday, one of the HPtuners Facebook pages, about the saved logs, and they didn't know about that. So now you know, it saves your tunes as well. All right, so let's start this data logger up. Again, we're still in vehicle simulation mode. Again, timing tables factory, power enrichment tables factory, knock enrichments there, everything is still there. So we're going to get this thing up in a second gear. Controls the special functions. Lock it in a second gear. And let's do a hit. All right, so stop the scanner, and if you didn't know, you can start and stop the scanner with a space bar. Oh, I have a like 7 tips and tricks for HPtuners video. If y'all go back in my videos, you can see all this stuff. But I still like to try to remind you guys sometimes. All right, so you can see we're much closer right now. And all I'm doing is I'm taking actual versus commanded. And I'm making the adjustments in the math. So this is looking pretty good. Need some small changes. And then we can go to the VVE table and look at it. All right, so you'll notice how the math changes, change the VE table. And that's because we're building the VE table based off of the math, because the math is a dynamic airflow. Hopefully you guys are starting to catch on that once we get all this stuff to jive, makes everything happy. So I'm gonna go ahead on and make the change to the math again. And while I'm at it, I'm gonna go on and make a VE table change. Now ignore this negative 13 right here. That's just when I lifted off the throttle, but all this stuff's gonna be accurate. So we're close up the very, very top. We're 4, 5, 6% off in the mid-range. So I will make this adjustment and we'll do another hit. And we just, basically that's the process, is you just keep going till the VVE is dialed, MAF is dialed, and then I'll turn on the dyno and we can maybe try to feed it a little bit of timing. I'm not sure how much timing this thing's gonna want, just because it is, like I confirmed with the guys, it's on 87 octane. So it's not gonna want a whole bunch, but anyways, I'm gonna make these changes and we'll be back. So as I'm making VVE adjustments, just wanted you guys to be able to see what the final V table is looking like. So you see, it turns out it looks halfway decent. So again, this right here, this shape is the torque curve, and everything's lining up like it's supposed to. All right, tune files loaded in. We're gonna do another hit in vehicle simulation mode. Now some of you guys may be wondering why I'm not doing dyno numbers, why I'm not. All I'm trying to do right now is getting the airflow model straightened up. So we want MAF to the point to where it will achieve whatever commanded power enrichment we actually set. We want the VVE table to match. We just want to make sure everything is happy. So, you know, there's a lot of guys that'll go through wide open throttle stuff and they're just like, okay, it'll be happy at 26 degrees and I don't know, 12.8 air fuel. And they just assume that's just how every truck's gonna be, and they just put that in every single truck. That's not how the process goes. So again, right now I'm on stock timing tables, I'm on stock, everything is stock when it comes to fueling as far as power enrichment goes. Like you can literally pull up my power enrichment table right now. You'll see knock enrichment is the only thing that I just turned off. And that's because on a DI vehicle, a lot of the times extra fuel doesn't help knock. You'll end up with a fuel knock with a rich condition, and it can essentially cause a misfire. But EQ ratio gas, you'll see it's a bone stock table. So all I'm trying to do is make sure it all matches. So in second gear, converter's locked. Let's roll into it again. So VVE table is looking good. Just ignore the coast down stuff. We're in deceleration fuel cutoff right now, so all that stuff's not gonna line up. All right, so I'm gonna stop the log again. Let's make this bigger. You'll see here, let's make this a different color. So you'll see orange is commanded, this light blue is actual, and you'll see where they basically overlay each other. So, I mean, it's really hard to get one much better than that. Now, on the track, you could for sure, if you had enough track passes, but you'll see, I mean, the most we're off is 1% right here. So I'm still gonna make that adjustment, but I'm just gonna multiply by half this time. So I'm gonna go down to 7950, and I'll multiply by half. And then now that this will be adjusted, so let's go 7950. So keep in mind, I'm loading up second gear on the dyno pretty heavily. We're gonna leave all that alone, so that'll be good. So now that I'm gonna do the third gear pulls, I'm gonna reduce the eddy brake to where I don't wanna have a legit third gear pull as far as vehicle simulation goes. Because if you do that, if we start at 3,000 RPM in third, now if you try that on the street, 3,000 RPM in third in a truck like this, it'll take forever to get to your maximum RPM. So I do all my MAF curve adjustments, heavily loaded second gear, that way I'm not creating a bunch of heat. And then from there on, I won't make any more MAF adjustments from here as far as wide open throttle goes. So I'll load this in. Let's stay stock power enrichment table, stock timing table, and let's see what kind of power this thing makes. All right, dyno's configured. Let's get up to third gear. Again, stock power enrichment, stock timing tables. We're gonna go 3,000 to, I think that for 6,200. So let's do a pull. Nope. Drive shaft did not feel good. Drive shaft definitely did not feel good. Yeah, I panic stopped. It made 323 horsepower, 336 foot-pounds of torque, but that drive shaft felt like it was about to come out of the truck. So we're gonna go second gear instead this time. Well, that was kind of creepy. I don't think I've ever had this body style truck feel like that at 100 miles an hour. So I don't know if maybe, I mean, the U-joints felt good, but I mean, maybe there's a little bit of extra slop in the trans-tail shaft, or I don't know. But that was definitely, if I'd have continued that pull, that drive shaft was coming out. So I'm gonna let the shop know, hey, if this customer, you may want to check this stuff out. So anyways, we are second gear converter locked now, and the dyno is more loaded. So it may change the dyno numbers slightly because we're in such low a gear, because I think this is like a 2.06 ratio versus like a 1.53. But either way, let's do another pull. Went a little bit above it just to make sure that the dyno gets shut off and applies the brakes and stuff. All right, let's get out and see how much power it made. All right, so that pull, it only made 302 with 341 foot-pounds of torque. Now, keep in mind, by us dynoing in second gear, we're not applying as much load on the engine, and it's not as close to a 1-to-1 ratio, so that's why the power dropped. But all we're looking for is the fact that it just made 302 is fine. We'll make some adjustments in the tune to try to increase power. And so I don't really care what this end number is right here, because I'm going to explain to the customer, or explain to the shop why we didn't do a third gear pull. But I don't care about how high this number is. I just want to see the differences in if we add timing, if we pull fuel, whatever we're about to do, we want to make sure that this number just keeps going up. And we just go into the point where the number stops going up. All right, so looking through the data, again, we're following commanded air fuel, just like we're supposed to. I mean, it's basically dead on the entire way. So we're seeing a peak of 16 degrees of ignition timing. Now, I know that's gonna sound low to you guys, but in a truck, on 87 octane in a truck, that is a normal timing value for one of these. These trucks pick up huge from octane. So 93 octane, be a whole different story. E85 is a way different story. This truck would probably pick up 40 to 50 horsepower on E85, like really easily. And I'm talking about like apples to apples, like second gear pull to second gear pull, it would pick up that much power on ethanol. So the first thing I want to do is let's lean this thing out just a little bit. We're not going to go anything crazy. Let's go under power enrichment. And what do I want to do? Let's keep the, no, let's command our own power enrichment values. All right, so I'm going to go from like 0 to 3,000 RPM. Let's go 1.136. Now I work with everything in lambda. So if you want to know how to do lambda power enrichment, all you've got to do is it's 1 over lambda. So go 1 divided by 0.87 lambda is 1.149. So 1.136 is going to be like 0.88 lambda, which may sound a little bit lean to some of you guys, but direct injection vehicles are totally cool with it. And that's also what we're going to do in the lower RPM region. So for right around peak torque, let's go with let's do 1.176. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to interpolate horizontally. And then for up top, let's go 1.163. Yeah, let's roll with that. So we're gonna do a fuel only change. And just because I'm OCD like that, I'm gonna copy this table and I'm gonna put it in the alcohol table as well. No timing changes right now, just fuel. So I'm gonna load this in and we'll see how much power it picks up, if it picks up power at all. All right, so going back into second gear, this is a fuel power enrichment only change. So theoretically, this truck should pick up a reasonable amount of power. Timing's gonna be the same. Now, by leaning this out, not only are we running the engine leaner, but we're gonna put the injection timing back in its more of a happy spot. Since the truck's making more power up top, theoretically, if we wanted to run it that rich, we would have needed to make an injection timing change, but this should bring us back down to where our split's like 180 degrees or higher. So we're in second gear locked. Dyno is started. Let's do another pull. so let's see where we were at on timing. Looks like we lost a little bit of timing on that one. So it actually looks like we lost some power. Yeah, 299. But that's going to be from the drop-in timing. So I was hoping it was going to be more drastic and show something cool, but it's not. So let's go in and put a little timing in this thing and see what it picks up from there. All right, so another thing that I wanted to do as I'm putting in timing as well is it looked like our injection timing is a little bit off. So if you watch this split SOI right here through the pull, I like them to be right around 180 degrees. And you'll see where once we start to get up top, how it starts to fall below that. So I'm gonna add a little bit to it. So what I do is I graph it out. And again, if you need to make a graph, this right here shows primary SOI, but that's where I'm at right now. So the parameter I have in here is split SOI. The column axis is in cylinder air mass, and where you find that is gonna be under fuel, general. Scroll down to SOI base, and that's where you pull your axis from that. RPM will be the other column, or the row axis. So what I'm going to do is since I've looked at where we're at, I know 5600 is going to need at least another 7 degrees. 5800, here, let's just do it like this. So let's say 5600, let's see, how much air mass are we at? 0.72 is the lowest we went. So 0.72 right here, right? Yeah, so we're going to add 7 degrees here. 5800, we were 8 degrees off. And I'm just going to go through here and I'm going to add to the SOI table what I was lacking, the difference between this number and 180 degrees. So I'm doing that because I'm going to run this truck a little bit richer. So these trucks are cool with down to like 0.88 lambda or so. If you're on ethanol, you can get in like the 0.90 lambda, somewhere like that. But because the truck, it's a heavy truck, I'm going to go ahead on and keep it at around 85 lambda up top. So 85, 86, something like that. So because of that, I'm going to make an injection timing change. So it's 6,000, we're about 8 degrees off there. 6,200, we're like, we'll just call it 6 degrees. 6,400, we were basically good. I'm going to add a degree from like here. That's where it was starting to lay over. I'm sure that's probably from the exhaust. So then I'm just going to interpolate over horizontally. And so we'll keep that table like that. So now I'm going to add some timing. Let's just go with like, I don't know, I'm going to add 2 degrees. But so when I make timing adjustments on these, what I will always do is I go to the main table. Now, this gas table, stock. IET table, stock. GM knew what they were doing when they were making the power enrichment table and when they were making the IET table. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add, remember where we saw like 0.72? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put, let's just do 2 degrees. And I'm just going to smooth it. Obviously, I don't want there to be less timing in one spot than there is in the other. But you also don't want to get too aggressive with these because these trucks, they definitely will knock on the street for sure, especially when towing. So you don't want to overtime these things. Now, if the exhaust was opened up more, it would be okay, or it would be better. But then what I'll do is I'm going to compare it back to this file and you'll see what we ended up adding. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to transfer it over to the low octane table. So high octane, low octane, they were stock. And so now they're just slightly modified. So we'll load in these changes and we'll see if it picks up some power. It should pick up, I mean, I would think it picks up at least 10. So and the guys come out and they check the drive shaft again, even though we did. And he brought up a good point. This is a 2-wheel drive truck. I don't tune many crew cab 2-wheel drive trucks. Most of the time around here, at least, the crew cab short beds are 4-wheel drives and then the single cab short beds are 2-wheel drives. So this drive shaft is really long. So it could just be that we're just hitting critical speed, which I will always preach to you guys is just be careful with these trucks on the dyno, be careful with them on the street. You know, again, this truck 95 to 100 miles an hour had that vibration. The driveline vibration that I'm feeling is going to feel more apparent to me because the truck's strapped down and we're in one spot. This guy could take it out on the street and try to do that and not feel that vibration. Drive shaft comes out, takes out the fuel tank, takes out the exhaust, takes out everything. So there's a very good reason why they're speed limited the way they are. These drive shafts definitely have critical speed. So if you want to go faster than that, definitely hit up PST or somebody and get you a good drive shaft. We're going to get back up into second gear. Let me activate the dyno. Oh, of course it was. All right, let me start the dyno. I don't know why that happened, but I use any desk to run the dyno. Works really good, especially when it's cold like this. Keeps me from having to get out of the truck so much. All right, everything looks good. Let's do another pull. So looks like we saw 17 degrees. Oh, we're getting spicy on this one. Let's see if it picked up some power. All right, picked up exactly 10 horsepower, like exactly. So that's cool. I need to, hang on, save trace, save results. I don't know why those buttons got unchecked, but all right, let's just put a little bit more timing into it and see if it likes it. All right, so air fuel still looks good. Let's look at injection timing. Looks good there. Still need to add a little bit more. All right, so 5,600 to the bottom. I'm gonna add some more. So let me add that to it, because with the added timing, we picked up a little bit of cylinder air mass because the truck was actually making more horsepower or more torque. So because of that, it moved to the 0.76 mark. So I'm gonna make a change to injection timing, and let's add another, I don't know, let's try another 2 degrees. All right, 2 degrees has been added. Now, again, please keep in mind, power numbers were in second gear. We saw there was a 20 horsepower difference just from going from third to second, same tune-up. This truck does have the small exhaust and has a stock airbox. So if you're comparing it to what you think you may see, just understand, if you've got good exhaust after the Y-pipe, that's definitely gonna help. If you've got an aftermarket airbox like an S&B or something, that's gonna help. If you're on a higher octane fuel, that's gonna help. I mean, you see, we're not running this thing on a ton of timing, and we're only able to run that timing right now because it's cold inside the shop. So with the IAT modifiers, they will pull that timing out, but right now we're getting full use of this ignition timing even on 87, because I mean, we're 62 degrees at the, like, manifold air temp 62 degrees. Like the actual air temp at the airbox is even colder. So dyno's ready to go. Again, we got another 2 degrees in it. Let's see if it picks up another. It's probably gonna pick up, I would assume, probably 8 this time, but let's see. Showing some knock on tip in on that one. All right, so we had a peak of 18.5, but pretty much the timing that I put in it, it got mad and yanked it back out. So it did pick up a little bit though. Let's see. Got 313.5, 326 foot-pounds of torque. So for the next test that we want to do, let's put some fuel back in this thing and see if it actually likes the added fuel. Some of these trucks, there's imbalance on fuel injectors, especially with 100 and some odd thousand miles, to where they may not actually like the commanded EQ to actually be as lean as what I'm running it on. Basically, the commanded EQ that I'm at is what I've learned works really good on a full bolt-on truck on E85 or 93 octane with a camshaft. But you know what? Let's put the table back to stock completely and see if it picks up any more power. I mean, it very well may. It may like stock fueling on this truck. Again, this is why we test. So I'm gonna go all the way back to stock. I'm gonna leave the ignition timing alone, and we'll see if by adding the fuel, the knock goes away and the truck still picks up power. So we're testing. So I'm gonna load this in, we'll do another hit. All right, load it up on the dyno. Dyno's ready to go in second gear again. Let's do another pull. Knock is gone. Stop the log. Still seeing 18.5 up top. Had a little bit more on tip end though. Let's see if it picked up any power. All right, so that one was 312 horsepower. So we literally lost 1 horsepower by going back to factory fueling. Now, what does that mean to me? So we lost 1 horsepower, but the knock went away. The truck seems to be just as happy. So there's no sense in me having the truck leaned way out like what trucks with more mods would want, when in this application, it actually doesn't give a shit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull just a touch of timing back out. I'm gonna leave the fueling right where it's at, and that's where it's gonna ride. So as we saw, the 20 horsepower difference between second and third gear, this thing would have made roughly 335 to 340 horsepower, which it actually made 333, but that's without weather correction factor, because it's literally 35 degrees in here right now. Like, I don't know if you can see, it's cold in here. So that's the downside of running a dyno, is in the wintertime, is doors open, exhaust fans on, you know. But either way, that's gonna wrap it up for this truck. Hope you guys learned some things. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna definitely be going through more video ideas. We're gonna talk about some diagnostics using the scanner, like being able to find misfires that a misfire counter wouldn't see. We're gonna go through a bunch of videos like that. So subscribe if you wanna see some more. But this truck right here, I'm going to make those last little subtle changes. I'm not gonna do any more pulls. I'm gonna take it out on the street, drive it, make sure it drives good. I'm gonna go back over my entire tune and make sure I didn't, you know, finger fuck anything, you know, basically. So double check it. Since I am on camera, I'm gonna go ahead on and make sure that the end result is exactly what we want the customer to have. So appreciate the support, guys, and I will see y'all in the next one.